Hi, everybody. You're listening to Let's Stay Together, which is a podcast, about the manga Fruits Basket by Natsuki Takaya. I'm Ellen.
And I'm Kayla.
So I have some little minor announcements. I feel like I said this a couple times. I can't remember if I said it in an episode, and I also posted on Tumblr, but we're on Twitter now, so if you're like a Twitter person, you can also follow us on Twitter. And also, we started a new thing where we're making episodes about the anime, little short episodes. Or at least ideally they'll be short. We'll see. I thought these
No
were gonna
promises.
no promises. I mean, we did make that one episode of this that was like an hour and a half or something.
Mhm.
And so, but yeah, the ideas are just going to we're calling it the Let's Stay Together anime break, and the plan is to quickly talk about the episodes and talk about if there are divergences from the manga. We do basically the same setup where there'll be a little summary discussion and then spoilery discussion. So it'll be the same thing. If you're trying to not be spoiled, have no fear because we won't be spoiling it unless you want to be spoiled, in which case you just listen to the whole episode and it'll be
Yeah.
fine. Okay, those are my announcements today. Oh, also, I guess I should say thank you all for your patience in this releasing this episode. As you can tell, I can now talk for a long period of time, which is nice. Um, so Kayla and I were actually in the same physical location. If you can't tell, but I'm sure you can, we record over Skype, so we're not in the same place, and we were briefly together, and we were going to record, and I was really sad about it that we couldn't record together. Uh, but because I had been sick, I could only talk in a whisper for like 3 days straight or 4 days straight.
Yeah, we thought about just doing it that way and billing it as an ASMR episode, or maybe pretending Ellen was a robot and doing some text to speech. But we
Yes.
decided waiting was the best option.
It was a better choice, I think, in the end. Unless you want to listen to Microsoft Sam for an episode.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it was awful. I had to tell everybody my orders. I had to be like, ask for hot water the whole time that we went out, and we made a lot of jokes about not being able to talk, and it was great. But yeah,
You'd tell me where things are, and I'd be like, "Is it a secret?"
yeah. Also, what was I thought was really funny, and I don't think everybody noticed, but then everybody was quiet all the time. So
Yeah,
so everybody else would like whisper or talk really quietly, which I thought was kind of weird.
because we wouldn't be able to hear you otherwise.
Yeah. Or if actually the really worst thing was like we would go out to eat somewhere, they'd be playing really loud music, and I'd be like, ask for water, and the person sitting next to me would be like, what? And I'd be like, water. Oh, it's terrible. And then I went back to work when I got back from traveling, and people were like, "Oh, your voice sounds a little off. Are you getting sick?" And it was like, "This is the most I've been able to talk for the last since Sunday or whatever," and it was awful. Anyway, so thank you all for your patience, and also a couple of people commented, and they were and wished me well, and were hoping that I would get better. So thank you very much. That was really sweet. I wasn't expecting that. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I don't know what order. So we just recorded some episodes. We recorded the first couple episodes that I was mentioning about the anime, and I mentioned in there that in one of them, that we really enjoy getting all people's asks and messages, and I do really appreciate it. It's really nice. I feel um, very like it makes my day, and also I feel really pleased that we have this kind of connection with our little audience, which is great. I'm really happy
Our
about it.
hearts grow 3 sizes every time we read one.
Yes, every single time. Our hearts are going to be so big by the end of this. We're going to have like elephant hearts.
We're
um,
going into cardiac arrest as we speak.
yeah, by the way, please send help. You also pointed out to me while we were together that our Tumblr has more than 50 followers, or had more than 50 followers. It probably has more. I mean, it has more now, I know. But so yeah, that was also really awesome. So thank you all for being so supportive and sending your comments and following us on the social network. It's nice on the social networks. It's nice that it's nice it's just nice to hear back because like I don't know. Basically, we record these and then it goes into the ether, so it's just nice to get people's comments, and it's great.
No, we're not just screaming into the void.
Or in my case, whispering into the void.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you all so much. Anyway, today we're going to talk about chapters 15 and 16 of the manga. We're going to do our regular format that we follow every time, which is a summary discussion and then a spoilery discussion. Okay, so chapter 15. The first the first panel that we get of chapter 15 is this kind of like sketchy style outline of Kyo with the dialogue overlaid. I don't want to see, I don't want to think about anything. And then our chapter proper begins with the gang inspecting Yuki's locker. And Yuki asks what they're looking for. And Uo says that she thought that they'd get to see a whole slew of chocolates pour out of Yuki's locker. And Yuki is like, that doesn't happen in real life. And, alas, there's only one gift of chocolate inside. And the gang seems dismayed. And by the gang, I mean Uo, Hana, and Tohru. I didn't say that, but they seem kind of dismayed. But Hana has a theory. It could be that the Yuki fangirls, much like the common cuckoo, kicking other birds' eggs out of the nest, they have been replacing the chocolate that was previously in Yuki's locker with one. And the proof is in the trash can, as it turns out. And Hana says that she's the hawk that swoops in to eat the chocolate. And then
Yuki's just standing by, letting them root through his locker and steal chocolate.
He's like, whatever, I don't care. Yeah. So then Kyo shows up. Uo greets him with a yo. And then he's like, hey, which I thought was really, I don't know, there's something about it that's really charming. I like their little friendship. This is their friendship based on arguing and very curt greetings.
Being annoyed by things.
Yeah, basically. They have a deep connection to their Kyo's. I feel like Kyo would have been a Yankee if he could have been, probably.
Yeah.
He certainly has that attitude. Kyo stares Yuki down with this look of utter loathing and then punches the locker right beside him. And then he stalks off to class. I feel like Kyo is not the best at morning greetings. Like, every time it's the morning, he's like, shut up, or like, whatever. And this time he just punched Yuki's locker, or punched the locker beside where Yuki was standing.
He's like the only early riser in the series.
Yeah, he gets up and then he does his training and then he's pissed off for the rest of the day. Yeah. Seems like it's not working. Anyway, Uo comments that he's not even hiding the fact that he hates Yuki, and Hana says that he's giving off naive waves. And Uo and Tohru are like, what? And then Hana says he's in chaos. And Uo is like, well, it's none of my business as long as he's not causing problems for Tohru-kun. The gang then, in the next scene, they're in the classroom. I don't know, there wasn't a clear transition, but they're sitting in the classroom, and all the girls are kind of hovering around Yuki, anticipating when they can give Yuki their chocolate. And Tohru thinks that it must be the scariest day of the year for the Zodiac. I didn't mention this before, but it's Valentine's Day, because I was saving it for this moment where a girl gives Kyo some chocolate, and Tohru and Uo are like, oh, Kyo's popular too. And there's a lot of cute, we keep talking about all these little background, like, continuity things that are happening, and there's a bunch in this chapter. Like, there's the girl who's, like, the girls are all creepy staring at Yuki, all in the background while Tohru, Uo, and Hana are talking. The girl who gives Kyo chocolate then talks to her friend and is like, I did it, like, in the background, and it's really cute. But yes, we learned that Tohru is planning to give all the Soma boys chocolate, and Uo and Hana as well, because she does this every year, like an awesome, kind friend would do. And then, so meanwhile, Kyo's buddies, these two boys come over, or think they're Kyo's buddies, to congratulate Kyo on getting chocolate. And one is like, want to bet on how much you'll get? And then only then Kyo is like, is today Valentine's Day? He was consumed with his hatred for Kyo, or for Yuki all the time, and didn't notice the calendar creeping up on him or whatever. And they're like, no, it's tomorrow. And Kyo is like, he stands up and he's like, I'm going home. And everybody is like, what? They're kind of all the class is kind of looking at him in confusion. And then he's like, no, it's too dangerous. I got to get out of town. And so as he is hustling to get out the door, their teacher shows up and stops him from leaving by, like, slapping him in the face with a folder, which is also awesome. And she's like, oh, what, you're trying to cut class, punk? And then as he sasses her back, she threatens to dye his beautiful orange hair, if he misbehaves. And she teases him about getting chocolate and continues to be sassy as Kyo sits back down. And Tohru is temporarily relieved, but wonders why she wonders if Kyo has bad memories of Valentine's Day. Outside, after class, the wind blows, and Tohru realizes what Kyo is concerned about, because Kagura is waiting for them at the school gate. And Kyo's face when they see her is just, like, shocked and panicked. And Kagura runs up to greet Kyo, which of course turns into chasing him passionately as he runs away. And Tohru wonders if it's unfair to Kagura, but she feels a little sorry for Kyo. Later at Shigure's house, they're all sitting around the glorious kotats, trying to be warm. And Kagura says that Valentine's Day is important for lovers, and Kyo is like, lovers? And Shigure is like, don't be rude, she'll break my house. I love how Shigure's primary concern often is the house being broken.
Yeah.
Kyo is like, this wouldn't have happened if I just left damn Valentine's Day sneaking up on me. And Yuki is like, most people would have noticed. That's so funny. Shigure asks if Kagura came to give Kyo chocolate. She says no. She came to ask him to go somewhere special tomorrow to give him the chocolate. And Kyo was like, what? And Tohru comes in and is like, oh, you mean like on a date? And Kagura's like, oh, when you put it so bluntly, it's embarrassing. And they have their little cute moment. And Kyo was like, no. And then Kagura stands up and is like, you'll do it, and her scary face. And then Kyo is like, fuck no. And then, sorry, that's my interpretation of what he says. I can't remember what he actually says. Kagura makes this little piggy snort noise.
Yeah, her little shocked reaction is identified by an oink.
Yes, yeah, it was great. It's like her face is, her eyes are kind of like shaded, like they're covered, and it's like piggy snort oink. It was kind of awesome. I feel like Kagura's, it's not like Kyo like yowls or meows or anything like that. Like I like how Kagura has this kind of like really I don't know, boorish reaction when she's angry, which is funny. But anyway, her rage turns into sadness and tears well in her eyes, and she's like, you could be a little bit nicer. And then Kyo is kind of like, don't cry. Like he kind of submits to the feelings, the feels. Shigure pops in and is like, ugh, I can't stand it any longer. If you must make out, please do it somewhere else. And Kyo is like, no one asked you. Kagura suggests that they make it a double date, and then with Yuki and Tohru. And there's a little cut to a panel of, I guess, like Toru's handing Yuki a drink, and they're both like, huh? And it says, there's a little note that's like suddenly dragged into the conversation or something. Shigure thinks it sounds like fun, and Yuki's like, wait. And then Kyo's like, why should I have to do anything with that damn rat? And Tohru, who reacts last and cutest, is like, oh, I've never been on a date before. Is it allowed? And Yuki and Kyo notice her shiny-eyed excitement, and then Kyo gives in. I think there's like the kanji that says like defeat or whatever.
Yeah.
Tohru looks so excited about it too. It would be difficult. It would be difficult to deny her, I think. So after that, Kagura leaves, and as she leaves, she mentions that Hatori told her that Yuki and Kyo were getting along a little better, and that if they got to know each other and started to get along, she would really like that too. And then she takes off, and Shigure is of course there to pick on Kyo immediately, and he tacks on that Haru is wise and that people need to compromise, and Kyo is like, I don't want to get to know Yuki better, I hate him and I like hating him, and then he storms off outside. Tohru is there, I think from doing some chores or something, and she's like carrying something around, and she overhears it, and Yuki also appears at the top of the stairs and overhears the next thing, which is that sorry, Kyo hasn't stormed off yet. Yuki shows up and overhears the next thing, which is Shigure says that Kyo acts like he's obligated to hate Yuki, but his eyes tell a different story that he's afraid to find out. And then we see a flashback from the last chapter where Yuki is lying on the ground when he wasn't able to breathe. It's actually like directly cut from the chapter. Like it's like directly, it's the same panel, or the same two panels, where it's Yuki laying on the ground and Kyo looking at him concerned. We talked about this in the episode, like the way that he reacts. But anyway, those two specific panels are cut there, and kind of like faded or whatever. The normal, like, we get the Takaya memory treatment on the images. And then on the next page, on the right side of the page, we see this flash in kind of like a negative image style. Kyo has this shocked face, and then he seems like he's remembering something very shocking. If you look at the bottom of the page, it looks like we see a person. We see like an arm and a torso. It's not clear who the person is, and it looks like they're on a pool of dark liquid, which I assume is blood. I mean, like, we can't. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to discuss this because we know what this is. You and I do, but yeah. I do have some things I think we can say without spoiling why he has this kind of flashback. But yeah. Anyway, so we see this image of this shocking image. It looks like something that Kyo is remembering. Kyo then runs off. Sorry, I said it earlier, but this is when he hightails it out of there. And then Tohru runs after him. Yuki comes down the stairs, and he's like, what were you talking about? And Shigure says that he was irritated, and maybe he pushed Kyo a bit too hard, which is interesting. Outside, Tohru tracks Kyo down, and when she finds him, he's like crouched and kind of huddled. Like, he's crouched on the ground, and he's kind of hugging himself, which is really really sad. It's one of the saddest things I think I've seen so far in the series, actually. It's not something that I remembered. But yeah, she, her expression kind of softens into like concern. I wrote in my notes that it's the face that I try to make when I want someone else to know that I'm concerned. Like it's, you kind of like, her eyes are kind of narrowed, but like and her eyebrows are kind of like scrunched into a concerned looking face. And Tohru thinks that it's as if hating is a way to protect it's as if hating things or whatever, the hate that Kyo is expressing is a way of protecting himself. She says, or she thinks, I'm sure the answer is in such a deep place that he'll have to figure it out for himself. Kyo is like, forget it, forget what happened, it has nothing to do with you. Tohru thinks that no matter what she says, she may not be able to cheer him up, but she says, you don't have to get along, it's okay. I thought I wanted you to get along, but it's okay even if you hate him. In this, it seems like Kyo kind of lifts his head up a little bit and he opens his eyes. Like, his head is completely down on his knees, but then in the next panel, he's looking up. He remembers what Tohru said, so he has this memory of what she said before, where she's comparing him to an umeboshi. She says, I can see them, there's an amazing umeboshi on your back, Kyo-kun. Kyo-kun is wonderful too. In his memories, this is what he remembers her saying. It seems like he relaxes further and then sits up, and he simply replies, yeah. We see Toru's eyes in this one scene where he talks and is kind of surprised again. In this scene, she kind of flips back and forth between being concerned and then surprised. I have a little note about it to discuss, but it seems like she's a little surprised by him responding to her. And then Kyo says, I don't want to see, I don't want to think about it, not yet. So this is basically what was being foreshadowed in the very first part of the chapter. It looks like it's the same scene, like Kyo's wearing like almost the same thing in that little sketchy scene. But Tohru thinks that Kyo's heart is delicate, just like Yuki's. They walk back together, and Tohru asks if it's okay that they're all going out together, and Kyo says he doesn't care, just this once. Tohru's inner monologue continues, saying, Yuki and Kyo hold on to suffering, pain, and anxiety. Someday I hope that I can wipe all that away like they did for me, because I want both of them to be happy. And at this part of the dialogue, Kyo looks over at Tohru, who's kind of smiling this little smile, like a very small, satisfied kind of smile, and he blushes a little, and then he bonks her on the noggin, as he tends to do. They get back to the house, and Shigure teases Kyo, of course, and the balance in the house is restored. Tohru is like, it's like nothing happened. There's also an omake at the end of this chapter where Shigure teases about Yuki being a woman. I was like, okay, whatever. But the payoff is that we get a little angry rat Yuki at the bottom, which was cute.
Yeah.
All right. In chapter 16 opens with baby Shigure waking up in the morning. There's some floral imagery there. I think it's magnolia. It looks like to me, which is like these, it's kind of this like tulip-shaped flower on a tree. I think that it's magnolia. But anyway, there's a monologue, or kind of like his internal monologue there. It says, I had a dream about the one I love, and there was nothing that I could do. So we cut to the present. Shigure is listening to a voicemail from someone, like, scream begging him to have the last 20 pages ready, and that she'll be coming over. And he's like, well, she did say please. Yuki and Tohru pop in to say that they're heading out soon, and Shigure tells Yuki not to be cheap or anything, and then he also sasses Kyo, or they're heading out for their date, and sasses Kyo, who is, like, grumpily watching the news. And we know that he's grumpy because his little kitty ears are up.
Yeah.
It's really great. And
Shigure, like a foot away from the TV.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's like he's a little kid. It's like he's a little kid. Like, it's really cute. I thought it was funny. But yeah, it is a great way to ruin your eyes. And he sasses Kyo to do the same, which of course Kyo replies, this is stupid. So, it's another typical morning with Kyo. The first thing out of his mouth is that something is stupid. Anyway, Tohru asks if Shigure is okay delivering her chocolate to the other Soma guys because she's going out. And Yuki's like, there's no need for you to go to the main house. And Shigure and Tohru are like, yeah. Like, because they know that she's already been. Shigure puts his hand on Tohru's head and is like, just have fun today. And of course, she smiles and says, okay. After that, we get a little creepy glint in Shigure's eyes in this one panel. And then he sees the gang off for their double date adventure. The answering machine picks up another call from Shigure's editor, who is saying that he could pretend to be out, but just please don't leave. And Shigure is like, well, if that's the behavior she expects from me, then I must do my part not to let her down. We cut to Tohru. We cut to Tohru, Yuki, and Kyo meeting up with Kagura, who has lampreyed herself to Kyo already immediately. And she says she couldn't sleep because she was so excited. And Kyo was like, oh, well, you better go home and take a nap then because you're tired or whatever, which I thought was funny. Tohru kind of looks off like she's distracted, and Yuki asks if she's still worried about Shigure. She says she is. She can't tell what he's thinking, and Yuki says that aside from Hatori, very few people can. Someone once described him as a ripple on the water. He's a man who can't be caught. And we see that little flash of that person. It looks like a woman describing Shigure that way. Yuki says that it's poetic, but if you ask him, Shigure is more like a jellyfish floating on the water. And it says in a little side note there that someone else also said that, and that it was Hatori. So it was funny. Kagura calls for them to hustle to get to the movie on time, and Yuki thinks that Shigure may be smiling on the outside, but on the inside, he's up to something. We also see some floral imagery again, which looks like ivy this time. So I looked up the meaning of ivy on the... there's like, I think I linked it in an earlier episode in the show notes, the Hanokotoba, which is like the meaning of flowers. And this website says that ivy represents like friendship and fidelity or whatever. So I was like, I don't think that's why it's being used there, but whatever. There's some weird...
Does ivy have that many berries?
I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. The leaves look like ivy, and it has those little...
They do. It's got little curly things.
Yeah, the little things that grab onto stuff, but...
Yeah, I've never seen ivy with that many berries.
I don't know. I've never seen it with berries. I'm Googling ivy berry. Oh, it does have a lot. Oh. Google ivy berries. It says English ivy, very good for birds. This article from The Guardian. Ivy berries are some of the last available sustenance for hungry birds before the temperature increases and other sources of food disappear. Can you eat ivy berries? Oh, the entire plant is toxic. Great.
Yeah.
Anyway.
If you're lost in the woods and trying to figure out what you should eat, don't eat what the birds eat. They have a different digestive system from you.
Yeah, they'll just poop out all the poison.
Eat what the bears eat.
Good point. Also a great safety note. So like adding to our safety notes from before, tell someone where you're going, don't live in a tent, and don't eat the same thing that birds eat. We're doing the world of good here, Kayla.
Yes. All 50-some followers.
Yeah, basically. Safety. Okay. Anyway, we cut from this little scene of Yuki. We cut to the main house. I don't think it's Hatori's house. I'm pretty sure it's the main house. We cut to a traditional Japanese house. So I'm pretty sure it's the main house where Shigure has come bearing the chocolate for Hatori. And Shigure is like, here's some Valentine's chocolate for me. And Hatori slams the door in his face, which is also great. And then Shigure is like, I lied, it's from Tohru, please let me in. And Hatori is like, what an idiot. They're sitting at a table, and looks like someone brings them tea. And this is another reason why I think it's the main house, because I don't know if we've seen it yet. This is, I guess, maybe a minor spoiler if this is the first time, but there are like maids or people who take care of, like they bring people stuff in the main house. So someone brings them, a woman brings them tea, or at least she brings like china cups, so I assume it's tea. And Hatori comments that Tohru is very thoughtful as they're sitting down, and Shigure says that he also brought chocolate for Miji and Haru. Shigure says that he volunteered to bring the chocolate because Tohru was on a double date with Yuki, Kyo, and Kagura. And Hatori is like, that's unexpected. And Shigure is like, isn't it just? That's also my interpretation. He doesn't say it like that. I don't know. Hatori comments that Tohru has had quite the influence on them. And then we cut briefly to them, quote-unquote, enjoying the movie Mogeta, The Last Crusade. Which is funny because this is the first time we're seeing Mogeta, which is like a recurring, I don't know, side character in Furuba. Yeah. In the movie, the main character is like, Mogeta, don't give in to the forces of evil. And then there's some other stuff about transforming, and Kagura and Tohru are like crying, and Yuki and Kyo are just like not looking at the movie, like they're just bored or whatever. That little cutscene is funny. I thought it was funny. Anyway, back in our main conversation between Hatori and Shigure, Hatori smiles and says that might be Toru's influence. There's something about her that softens people. And Shigure lights a cigarette, and then he flicks the match into the ashtray and misses like an asshole. Just gonna burn that whole main house down. Shigure says he was picking on Kyo earlier, and Hatori is like, you shouldn't do that. And then Shigure is like, when Kyo came back with Tohru, it was like nothing happened. That Tohru was like a tranquilizer for Yuki and Kyo. And Hatori is like, well, you must be pleased with yourself. Everything is going as you planned. And Shigure looks like he's surprised that Hatori would say that. Then with the kind of like side eyes, he asks Hatori, why are you taking that tone with me? Hatori chucks his match actually hits the ashtray and gets it in the ashtray and is like, you're lying. You and Akito are doing a great job using Tohru for your own selfish reasons. And then Hatori looks sternly at Shigure, and Shigure looks away. And I think there's kind of like a moment, and then Shigure looks at Hatori and asks if he remembers the morning that he had that dream. Hatori and he and Aya, someone named Aya, who we haven't met yet, all cried. Shigure says, that morning it became something painful for you two, but for me it still remains in my heart. And his inner monologue kind of continues, and we get a couple of like flashbacks. So the inner monologue says, that longing, that passion, paralyzingly sweet and sad. We see a memory of what looks like baby Hatori and Shigure is saying, I want to make it last forever. I want to hold it in my hands, and I will. Shigure says, like back in the present, Shigure says that he still remembers that vow, and that if he can make it happen, he won't feel guilty about it, even if someone gets hurt in the process. And then Hatori face palms. I mean, he kind of like pushes his bangs back in frustration. And Shigure continues, there are times when I hate myself for it, especially when I see Tohru-kun. She really is a good kid. She may be a tranquilizer for Kyo and Yuki, but for Shigure, he's forced to see that he may be the filthiest one of all, that he may be the most cursed. And then while he says this, there's a cutaway again to Kyo and Tohru and Yuki and Kagura on their date. It looks like they're at a table, like maybe they're going to order food. Their conversation is interrupted because Akito is ready for a checkup. And Shigure is like, let me stand in for you. And Hatori is like, I thought you might say that. Shigure is about to leave to see Akito, and Hatori comments that one of these days, Yuki or Kyo, or even Tohru, might go off on him. And Shigure is like, I hate pain, but I guess it can't be helped. And Hatori says, I won't be on your side, but I won't be your enemy either. And Shigure smiles, kind of a small smile in return. Shigure takes off, and Hatori sasses Shigure not to let Akito catch a cold. As Shigure leaves, Hatori says that he's just as dirty as Shigure, and that's the end of their scene. The scene then transitions into this like internal monologue, which I think is Shigure's. It says, you can take my teeth or my bones, they don't matter to me. I will get it, and I'll do whatever it takes to get there. Even lie or use people, I will make that dream last forever. And it's overlaid over the scene where he visits Akito, and he says that he came to see Akito in person because Akito is most important. We cut away to the gang walking back from their double date adventure, and Kagura and Tohru are talking about the movie, and they're like, I cried, I loved it when Mogeto was like, whatever, with the real emperor or something. And Kagura essentially invites herself over to dinner. I mean, she's like, I want to try Toru's cooking before I go. And Kyo is like, you're shameless, go home. Which she chooses to interpret as him being embarrassed. And she calls him Mr. Bashful and then, like, strikes him with her finger in his forehead. There's the scene where Yuki, like, flicked Toru's cousin in the forehead. And this is, like, the same, but I guess in Kagura's case, it's probably, like, concussing Kyo or something. Like, it's quite intense. Yuki doesn't give a shit, and then he wonders if Shigure is home yet or not. Oh, it's in the background, so she calls him Mr. Bashful, and she does the thing. And then there's this another one of those, like, continuity background things, where Kyo and Kagura are arguing in the background, and then the next panel, Kyo's running away, and then Kagura catches them hugging, and it catches him and hugs him, and while Kyo has his little kitty ears, like, kind of folded down in defeat. So all that happens in the background while these other things are happening that I'm about to say, which is really great. I noticed it this time, I thought it was awesome. Yuki doesn't care, as I said. and he wonders if Shigure is home, and they find a woman slumped against the front door, and Tohru is like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "I'm completely fine." And then while slowly clicking open one of those like sliding X-Acto knives, she's like, "Now if you don't mind, I'm going to kill myself." But Shigure arrives, and Tohru's like, "Ah!" And Shigure arrives just in time to stop the drama, and he's like, "Please don't kill yourself on my porch." And she turns around, and she's like, "Sensei!" Ooh. And then Shigure is like, "This is my editor," and Yuki is like, "I know." So once again, or inside again, Shigure is working in his office while his editor, who he calls Michan, sobs. And Tohru comes in and is like, do you bring some tea? And she's like, "Do you want some tea?" And she asks Shigure if Michan will be okay. And he's like, "Don't worry." He passes on thanks from Hatori, Momichi, and Haru while Michan is crying in the background and having tea. Of course, Shigure passes on his thanks from Momichi, Hatori, and Haru for the chocolate, and he asks where his is, and Toru's like, "I'm making it right now," and that she would be honored if he would accept it. And we see this little, like, Shigure's eyes kind of pop open in surprise, kind of this pleased surprise, and he sees Kagura and Tohru chatting happily, and then he kind of like shakes off those happy feelings and gets back into his like kind of his regular state of mind. It's like the thing that he, well, I guess we'll talk about it in a second. Shigure's editor sasses him and is like, "Get back to work. Isn't this job important to you?" And he says, "The most important thing to me has always been me," to which I'm guessing the reply is just like stunned silence, because we see it represented as like the little ghost outline figures where Shigure is leaning back in his glasses and Michan is just like frozen, which was really funny. I think that's one of the first time, like, Takaya uses that style on a lot of occasions. This might be the first time. I can't remember. There was stick figures when Yuki punched Kyo into the sky at the Culture Fest, but I think this is the first time we see these little ghosty type figures. After the stunned silence, Michan says that he should do his job for his own sake, because if not, she has to make his life miserable, and she'll follow him wherever he goes, and he's like, "That's scary." And then the last panel is him looking away, resting his head on his hand with kind of this sly expression, thinking, "Catch me if you can." And that's the end of chapter 16. Whew. I feel like a lot happened. So, but a lot of things happened, but there was no damage to Shigure's house, so we can't increase any of our counters, and there were no fights broken up by hugging. Although I do feel like maybe we should add a counter for Kyo bopping Tohru on the head. This is, I think, the second time.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a thing for them.
I think it's becoming a thing for them. So yeah, I think this is the second time, and it's becoming a thing. I'm gonna add it as a counter. Just gonna put it out there. We'll see what happens. We didn't meet any new Somas, but we did meet Michan, Shigure's poor editor.
Yeah.
Which was, it was an exchange. I love how she was leaving him these, like, her, what I interpret as her, like, scream begging messages of, like, "Please finish these pages. I'm coming over to get them. Don't leave." And then, of course, he immediately leaves. I want to talk about the exchange between Kyo and Tohru. It was in chapter 15, the first one that we summarized. I thought it was an interesting scene. I mentioned that her expression is really interesting. I thought it kind of like oscillates between shocked and concerned. So, like, she's walking out of the house and she's like calling for Kyo, and her eyes are open really wide, and it's not like shocked, I guess, like, but this kind of like wide-eyed expression. Then she finds him, in her face, her expression changes to concern. He says, "Forget about it," and so her face is like, it becomes kind of surprised again, then concerned again, and then when Kyo says, "Yeah," she's surprised again. Like, maybe she wasn't expecting him to react that way. I just thought it was interesting. So, like, we have this ongoing theme about the home or the house and how it relates to you, and I feel like Kyo is like constantly not subverting that, but he's constantly out of the house. Like, when things are happening, he's away. He got really uncomfortable and left the house, and this is where they had this kind of discussion, and then Tohru talks to him and kind of helps him calm down, and then they go back to the house at the end. I kind of wonder how this relates to that, if and how this relates to this kind of like theme about homes and yourself and family and that kind of stuff that we've called out before. I'm not really sure how it fits in, but I thought it was interesting to note, and I thought that the way that, I don't know, Tohru's expression is interesting, and also the things that Kyo is thinking about are interesting. Kyo, he says he doesn't want to get to know Yuki. We, of course, had that, the flash, that, like, negative image where Kyo is thinking about someone who like got terribly hurt at some point. I think that's what's implied by that image, and it's difficult for us to talk about without talking about that because it will return to it in the series. But it's interesting that so there's that image, and then he runs away, and then when he's talking about Tohru, the thing that he thinks about after she says that he doesn't have to like Yuki is her saying that he has, like, he basically saying that he has good traits about himself. So I wonder what it is that he's thinking about. Like, I just think it's interesting that all of that is paired together. He says that he hates, like, if you look at it overall, Kyo says that he hates Yuki and he likes it that way. He has that flash of that shocking thing that happened to him. Then Tohru says that he doesn't have to like Yuki. Then he thinks about Tohru saying that he has, like, redeeming qualities, essentially. So I wonder what it is. It's like he doesn't want to change his opinion about Yuki, and he also has a negative opinion of himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that what we can maybe interpret from that? I've never thought about this scene deeply before, but I think that's something that I feel like we can say, perhaps without spoiling anything. Like, maybe the reason that he's upset is it has something to do with the way that he thinks about himself and the way that he thinks about Yuki and how he's envious of Yuki, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
He uses his hatred of Yuki to not have to worry about himself, or, like, not have to face his feelings about himself. Tohru says that she thinks that he's protecting himself. The hatred is to protect himself from something. So maybe we can say that. I don't know. I think that's one way to interpret it, based on all the things that happen. I just also thought it was an interesting scene. It's kind of like, what was the one that we saw in the episode with Haru? There's that little scene where Tohru is like, did you like martial arts? And he's like, did I? Like, we got that one little that little cut. It kind of reminds me of that. I don't know why. I think, like, the way that it's positioned maybe in the chapter. It's like Kyo's being Shigure basically forced Kyo to question why he, like, his feelings about Yuki, I guess. But I think it's really maybe the interpretation is that it's more like he uses his hatred of Yuki to, like, cover his negative feelings about himself. So in that moment, maybe he's able to kind of overcome that. I don't know. That's just my interpretation of that. We'll have more spoiler things to say.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to talk about spoilery, but I think maybe we can interpret that safely that way. Another thing that a topic that I wanted to talk to you about is the date. So the date itself is kind of like whatever, but I thought about it. I was like, I don't know what there is to say about this, and I thought about it later, and I think it's interesting that the date. So, like, we also talked about in the episode where we talked about Haru, Yuki's sickness as a child is contrasted with the race, right? Like, that's kind of, his sickness is contrasted with the race. So in this case, the date maybe is contrasted with Shigure's visit to the main house. Like, it's directly cut in while he's visiting with Hatori. So I wonder what we can maybe interpret about that from the way that it's cut together. Like, Shigure is visiting, and the date is kind of like, he's talking about how he's like the most cursed. It's also kind of, it's positioned with another thing that you're going to have trouble discussing, which is the dream that Shigure had. So there's, maybe it's a spoiler, but we'll get more detail about this later. But to talk about it without talking about spoilers is like, the dream, Shigure says that he had feelings of longing and passion in the dream. There's this magnolia imagery that's repeated there and in the scene with Akito. So I think that the dream maybe is tied to Akito somehow. And then Shigure is talking to Hatori, and they have this really vague dialogue where Hatori is, of course, continuing to accuse Shigure of using Akito, and Shigure using Tohru for something. And it's kind of, but then it's all contrasted with their date. So it's like they're going out together. Shigure is in the main house. Shigure later is isolated with Akito, like he's alone with Akito.
Yeah, I think it's mostly like the contrast of like they're like out, having innocent, happy fun,
Yes.
And then they're in there talking about like, oh yeah, I'm using them for my evil plot or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Shigure also talks about how Tohru is kind of like an influence on Yuki and Kyo, and then we saw the way that she was an influence on Kyo directly in the chapter before. And then Hatori is like, oh, everything's going according to your plan, right? Like, so I guess maybe like what they're talking about could be that Tohru's like influence is that they're getting out out of the kind of like the regular, I don't know, the cycle that they're in and the locations that they're in. Like
Mm-hmm.
Tohru, like Kyo is in this kind of loop of self-loathing, it seems like, and Tohru breaks them out of that. They don't, Kyo and Yuki don't want to spend time together, and because of Toru's reaction to Kagura's suggestion, they acquiesce to going out together.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of that is contrasted with her being used for that. Like maybe that's what that you can interpret it that way.
Yeah, and like Kyo and Yuki get along fine when they're all out together on the date thing. We even have another picture of them having the same reaction to like an outside influence with the movie, where they're both like, "This is stupid."
Yeah. Yes, they're bonded together in their in their dislike, their reaction to the movie, and also like but then also their reaction of being like, well, whatever, like we're on this date, like let's try to like deal with it together or whatever. Yeah, it's they're on a mission. They can be on a mission together. Yeah. They're on a mission on that date, I think.
Yeah.
It feels like a mission. But yeah. The dream itself and like all the discussion with Shigure and between Shigure and Hatori is interesting. Like I do think that it's implied that the dream is about Aikido. We also saw Shigure and Aikido again. Shigure is standing over Aikido again. Like we saw, I think, in an earlier chapter, it seemed like Shigure was drawn from below and Aikido was drawn from above. Like it implied that they were in the situation where Shigure was above Aikido, which is really interesting because Aikido is the head of the family. So like I think it's kind of interesting the way that they're positioned implies that Shigure has some kind of power over Aikido, and he says that he's the most cursed. I wonder if that has anything to do with it. It's kind of interesting to see that as well. Is there anything else that you want to...
One thing I think is interesting is like where he says like he won't feel guilty about Shigure. Shigure says he won't feel guilty about what has to happen as long as he gets what he wants in the end. But then he talks about how he like hates himself for it sometimes, and he talks about how it's like especially with Tohru, and like while he's saying that, it has a little flashback to him like patting her on the head from earlier in the chapter, and then at the very end of the chapter where he's like teasing her about the chocolate, and she just says that she's making it right now and she'd be happy if he accepts. He kind of like looks surprised and sees her looking all happy and innocent, and it's kind of like he's like, God, I'm awful for a minute there.
Yeah. I thought that little his emotional reaction to that is really interesting. I can't really put my finger on what emotion it is. I think you're right. It could be kind of like oh, I'm so awful, or like I think it might have caught him off guard. Like I think what happened is that he realized that he was feeling happy about that reaction, and that feeling caught him off guard because he was like, oh, I'm not affected by her like the way Yuki and Kyo are, but he is just as much. And then he has that little like view of Kagura and her too. So I thought that was interesting. It's a good point.
Yeah. I also like how a little bit of the Mogeta movie is drawn in a different style.
Yeah, the Mogeta is funny. Like it's I like the way that it's like this like running thing in the series, and it's funny because it's like clearly a riff on like Pokemon or whatever. And I thought the dialogue, I kind of like, I didn't talk about it very much in the summary, but like the dialogue in it is really funny. It's like Ari transformed or like blah 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 transformed into Ari. It's like, and Mogeta, they're like, no, Mogeta, don't give in to the evil like thing. And Mogeta is like, Mogeta. I don't know, it's just really funny. And I also really enjoyed the way that Kyo and Yuki were like not into it at all.
Yeah.
It seems like a typical date. There's something about it that's really funny. In that case, maybe we'll move on to spoilery discussion.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So we'll cut it off. I will play music, and then we'll talk about spoilery things. Thank you all for listening, and thanks again for your patience with my voice. Also, I hope you enjoyed listening to this for like 3 hours. The sound of this. You can find us on all the Stay Together podcast places, and again, we really appreciate all your feedback and your notes. It's really heartwarming for us. So next time we're going to talk about chapter 17 and 18. And thank you all for your support and for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye! We're back to talk about spoilers. We have a lot of spoiler things to say, I think.
Yeah. I was thinking I had like a couple of small things.
Okay.
So we maybe talk about that before we go way in
depth.
The big thing.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's a good call.
So we get our Mayuko's first appearance.
Yes.
In this chapter.
Yes.
I don't think she even gets named in this chapter.
No.
She gets a recognizable appearance.
Yes.
And will show up for the rest of the series.
She also gets a quote drop.
Yeah.
We debated about who it was briefly.
Yeah, we couldn't remember the description of Shigure that Yuki talks about. We couldn't remember where it was, but I was digging around and I found that it was Mayuko during somewhere in volume 10. I can't remember which chapter.
It's 56. I looked it up for this. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to see it, it's 56.
Yeah, and it's like, it's taken pretty much directly from there. There's a really similar drawing of Mayuko during her relationship with Shigure. She also describes him as a jellyfish later on in the chapter.
Nice.
So she uses both of those descriptions.
The funny thing is that I wonder who told Yuki that. I mean, I guess maybe Hatori.
Yeah, I'm guessing like one of the Mabadachi trio like overheard, or she told it to one of them and later either like told it to Yuki or Yuki overheard them talking about it.
Yeah. Although it couldn't have been, it probably wasn't like Ayame, because Ayame doesn't really have a connection with Yuki until the series, so like maybe Hatori?
Probably not, but if they were like having a conversation, he happened to be there, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, but so it came from Mayuko, so he definitely overheard it from one of them, someone who knows her. And he doesn't know.
Ayame is still in contact with Mayuko.
Yes.
I'm not sure about Hatori at this point in the series.
Shigure is in contact with her too. It's just Hatori who really
not
wasn't. Just being annoying contact, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess Yuki doesn't know.
Shigure being like, you know what, someone called me once?
I don't know. Maybe he would be like that, but probably not to Yuki.
Yeah,
I don't get the feeling that they have a very close relationship, like Yuki and Shigure. They live together, but I think that Yuki's kind of wary of him. He's just like happy to not be in the main house. Yeah. And I think Shigure is kind of like whatever.
Yeah, I get the feeling it wasn't told to him directly, that he just overheard.
Yeah.
Somebody discussing it.
Yeah, it's funny that he knows though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that.
Yeah.
I'm just excited Mayuko's finally here. I feel like it's been so long.
She's fun. I like her.
Yeah, she's great. And I like that she was in the anime. We talked about it in our episode about the anime. That she's there, and it's nice. It was nice to get to see her too.
Yeah. And then somewhat related to Mayuko's appearance is we get she's like kind of hassling Kyo about his hair color.
Yeah.
And that becomes kind of a thing for other Zodiac members, where they're like unnatural hair colors and stuff. Their curse winds up kind of impacting their normal life, especially at school.
Yeah, there's that scene with Hataru later at school.
Yeah, there's the comedic one with Haru, and then the much less comedic stuff with Kisa.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Yuki never seemed to get picked on or sassed for his hair color.
Yeah. Maybe they think he's going prematurely gray and rude.
Maybe.
But yeah.
Or maybe they just think it's so beautiful. Yuki was just ahead of the like...
That's probably what it is. Probably the same as Ayame. They're just
like... Oh, yeah.
They're just like, oh, he's so pretty.
Yeah.
You can't say anything bad.
Yuki was just ahead of the like silver hair trend from a couple of years ago. Yeah. I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing is that we get a brief mention of Ayame.
Yeah, we did. Yes, we did. It's like, oh, yeah. You know him.
Yeah, that guy.
You know that guy. Yeah. It's funny because he's also been in the chapter, too. Like, he was drawn in that scene with Hatori when they're talking about his true form. Or not true form, his Zodiac form.
Yeah.
Hatori's true form is like an anglerfish. Anyway. The conversation...
Because he'd presumably be a male anglerfish, which is a tiny thing that attaches to a female anglerfish.
In any case, he's the short end of the animal break. He's getting... Kayla and I made a joke that we should have... we talked about the anime break. So the episodes that we're talking about the anime, we called it anime break. And I joked that we should have it... Or no, wait, I misspoke and called it animal break. And then I joked that we should have a thing called animal break because we talk about animals a lot. And then also we end up talking about animals because we talk about all the Zodiac. So animal break. It's funny that you mentioned that I picked anglerfish because like he's getting the short end of the sex stick for fish because he's a seahorse. So
yeah.
So he's either carrying the babies or he's like, just attaching to a female or whatever. Anyway. That's not canon. Anyway.
This is my new fanfic.
I still want someone to write or do fan art of Hatori at the aquarium being like surrounded by seahorses. I think that it would be hilarious. But alas, yeah. Did you have any other small things?
Yeah, everything else is either about the scene with Kyo or the scene with Shigure and Hatori. So.
Yeah, that's true. So who do you want to do first? You want to do Kyo? Let's do Kyo. Okay, let's do Kyo. So yeah, of course the scene, which it's very difficult for us to talk about without spoiling it, but this, or at least to say something meaningful without spoiling it, but of course the scene that Kyo remembered was Kyoko, Toru's mother, dying, I guess, after the accident. Which I thought was interesting that it's like, so Shigure says all of the images that are, all those parts of that are connected together are interesting, and I don't really know how to interpret them yet. But like at a high level, what happens is Shigure, so Kagura is like, I heard from Haru that you and Yuki are getting along better. Shigure, or then she leaves. Shigure is like, oh yeah, Haru's right. He comes to like pick on Kyo a little bit. And Kyo is like, fuck that. I hate Yuki and I like it that way. And then Shigure is like, you seem like you're just doing that because you're obligated. But you're scared to find out, like, what would happen, I guess, if you got along. Then he has that flashback. So that's an interesting thing. He leaves, and then Tohru goes and talks to him, and what he remembers her saying that there are good qualities about him, and that kind of like breaks him out of he's basically like in a fetal position on his feet. Like, kind of, it gets him out of that state of mind. Yeah. So all those things tied together, like, I wonder how you interpret that.
What I'm kind of seeing for this is that it's like all of like Kyo's negative stuff all bundled up together, because they're all kind of connected in vague ways. I think it's because I think later on when you get the full flashback of Kyo after the accident, when he's like with Kazuma, it's that like he kind of doubled down on his like, I'm gonna train and beat Yuki at that time. It kind of gave him like a purpose to hold on to.
It did.
Yeah. So that's kind of strongly associated there. His hatred for Yuki is kind of associated with that. And I think so that's part of why he's afraid to let go of that. And I think the flashback to him seeing Yuki during his attack in the previous chapter is part of him, like, he doesn't want to, like, he was feeling not hatred toward Yuki. And he's kind of like worried about losing that.
Yeah, like what would happen? Basically, like, you're right that the thing that, so basically, like, he never really worked through his feelings about what happened to Kyoko. So he got close to a person. Like, the way that what I'm seeing is that with Kyoko, he got close to a person who accepted him and cared about him, and then she died horribly, and he felt like he couldn't do anything to save her because of he's cursed, and that it would cause bad things for him, right? So that guilt is all tied up there with the fact that he got to know, he felt he cared for someone. Then you have the situation with Yuki. You're right that he basically, like, he never got over that guilt and those feelings. He never worked through those feelings or kind of whatever, acknowledged them and moved forward from that. He just ignored them and replaced them with this feeling that's like focused on hating Yuki and trying to defeat him, right? And that would fix his problems, because then he would be accepted by the Zodiac. Like, he's not accepted by the Zodiac. He was accepted by Kyoko, and she died horribly, right? And so, yeah, so, like, yes, all those things are kind of intricately tied together. And I think you're right that he feels like if he stops hating Yuki, like, what is he going to have? Like, that's the primary driver in his life. Like, he's heading to being confined. If he doesn't beat Yuki, he's going to be confined. He's going to be he feels like he's going to be in the same position that he is in right now. His ticket to get out, he feels like his ticket to get out of that is beating Yuki. But then, he couldn't. So then when he's in the scenario where Yuki is in a position and Kyo feels something for him other than hatred, as you pointed out, like, if he feels empathy or sympathy or whatever, anything, and like, or spending time with him, like getting to know him as a person, like, if he gets to know Yuki as a person, he's not going to hate him anymore, and he knows that. I think, like, Kyo knows that distancing himself from Yuki can help him stay in that state of mind, right? So that's why he doesn't want to spend time with him. It's why he doesn't push himself. And I think you're definitely right. You're right in your interpretation that it's all tied to all of those feelings are tied together very subtly. Yeah. So it's interesting that then we get this scene where all of them are put together pretty clearly. Like, but you wouldn't know when you're reading through it before, like, you wouldn't know any of that. So you can go back and see that, and it's really interesting. And then Tohru, it's funny because, so then Tohru, Tohru is like, you don't have to like him. So then what does that mean? And then Kyo thinks about where she said that he has redeeming qualities or whatever, that he has good qualities and Yuki does too. But he's only remembering the part where she talked about him.
Mm-hmm.
So is that just like kind of absolving him of that guilt?
I think it's kind of like at the moment maybe giving him the like it's okay, I don't have to deal with this right now kind of thing. Because he talks about like, I don't want to think about it yet.
Yeah, that's true.
About, like,
that's what he says at the end of that scene, and then he gets up. Yeah. And it's interesting that she's the one, like, he feels the whole, like, the tension that he feels about how he feels about Tohru and how he feels about what happened to Kyoko.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very, I think it's not super evident in this scene, but it's interesting that she's the one who's, it's like all those feelings of guilt are tied together, and she is able to say something that still kind of helps him, at least temporarily, kind of, go back to, I don't know, his usual self, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they even say, like, when he comes back to the house and he's back to sniping with Shigure, it's like nothing changed. So they're able to kind of just pull him back out of that, kind of back to his current stability.
Yeah, he's back to coping.
If not going forward yet, because he's not ready to go forward yet.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe you're right in the way that what she did was it led him to continue to cope.
Mm-hmm.
Shigure was trying to get him to face that. He was. I don't think that Shigure knows any of that, but he was picking at him in a way that.
Yeah, I think he knows kind of that.
He hates Yuki.
Hatred of Yuki is a coping method.
Yeah.
So I think he was just kind of tired of hearing that at the moment.
Yeah.
So trying to push him.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like, so Shigure pushed him, and Tohru was like, you don't have to. Yeah, maybe we can interpret it as saying, like, you don't have. What Tohru did was enable him to continue to, like, use all his feelings to cope.
Yeah. Because she even says, like, I may not be able, like, it might not be something I can fix. It's probably something he has to do himself. Mm-hmm. So he's obviously not ready to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very insightful of her to recognize that.
Mm-hmm. So she's just kind of giving him the support to keep going as he is until he is ready.
Yeah. And then she was also honest with him, too. She was like, I also would like it if you got along better with Yuki, but you don't have to. It's okay if you don't. Yeah. I think, that was a big scene.
Yeah, I think Tohru and Kyo are always pretty honest with each other when they're alone, which is a good thing for both of them.
That's what makes them a great ship. What?
You see that even pretty early on. Like,
Before, I'm still on the lookout for, like, when do they start kind of having feelings for each other? Mm-hmm. And I still don't think they do yet. Like, kind of. Like, I think they have these, like, kind of close feelings.
Yeah.
I noticed it more, like, in the anime. He does his little, like, bonk on the head. Well, you just talked about episode 4 of the anime. Mm-hmm. And he does that little bonk on the head, and she kind of, like, blushes. And I was like, oh, yeah, like, that's definitely getting to that place. But I still feel like in this, I don't know, it's like Tohru doesn't have those feelings yet. Kyo, I think I mentioned it, but he stands up. When he gets up to leave, he looks at her, and he has this little, she's kind of just smiling, and he has this little, he blushes, and then they keep walking together. So I actually think that maybe he's starting to develop feelings for her. But, because I don't know why, or maybe he's embarrassed or whatever. I guess, like, you could interpret it that way too. But he remembers, it's not like he remembers something else. He remembers the thing that she said about him too. I don't know. Maybe I'm just turning this into, like, a ship discussion, but I think it seems like they're getting there, but they're not really there yet. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree that they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, for sure. But it's more so interesting that Kyo has all this guilt around Tohru, and Tohru is the one who's still able to, like, comfort him to the point where he can get back to his regular, like, coping style,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think that helped me interpret it, because I was like, why would you pair all these things together? Like, you get, like, I don't know, I listed all of them before, so I won't do it again, but it's like, it's interesting that you get this, like, Kyoko scene inserted there seems kind of out of place, but I think the way that you put that together makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of messy when you first read it, but I think it's supposed to be, because it's supposed to be kind of like his inner turmoil.
Yeah.
Like, all this stuff just mixed up together and roiling around inside him.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Yeah.
I kind of talked about this before, but it's interesting how whenever something bad happens to Kyo, he, like, runs out of the house. So, like, for example, when Kagura was there, he was on the roof. And Tohru went outside and kind of, like, got him back, and then in this scene, Tohru gets him and brings him back. In his true form scene, Tohru goes and gets him and brings him back. In the scene where Tohru confesses to him at the end, he's outside. She's kind of like still in the house, like she's on the porch thing, but he runs off. So he leaves again. Every time something is uncomfortable for him, he leaves. And when Shisho first shows up, Kyo is like, he says that he hates living there, and he says that it's like lukewarm water, but it's like really what's happening is that he's getting close to people and he doesn't want to get close to anyone. So I think it's kind of, I just thought it was interesting how it fits into all of those things. Like there's something about Kyo can't stand to be in the house when he's being forced to deal with his feelings about these different things, like his guilt. Like when Tohru confesses, he admits that he was there when Kyoko died. The other, like, of course, there's the scene with his true form, and then these other things about his kind of insecurity or his other feelings. So it's almost like the house is being in the house where he has to be exposed to other people. It exposes him to, you know, getting close to Yuki or getting close to Tohru, getting close to other people, and he leaves when it's uncomfortable.
Kind of like in the early chapter, when Shigure is talking to him about like it's like training to be with people. Yeah, it's like training for martial arts. It's kind of like
it's a part of that. It's delivering on that. Like being there is uncomfortable. He leaves whenever he's uncomfortable. Someone, usually Tohru, goes and gets him. I think all the time it's always Tohru goes and gets him back and brings him back to the house where he needs to be to grow and work through all these feelings that he has and his guilt and stuff. Yeah, it was a good scene. I don't remember it. Like there's always things that I kind of. Like, I know that Tohru goes and comforts him a lot, but it wasn't something that I thought of. And now I'm thinking, like, it's a really interesting scene. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I've always remembered the imagery of Tohru kind of, like, kneeling next to him when he's all, like, curled up in on himself. That was always a striking image to me.
It's really striking. The way that he's curled up is really striking. Like I said, it's not something that I think of when I think of, like, scenes in Fruits Basket that I remember or, like, I don't know, enjoy. But when I got to that part, I was like, wow, like that's intense depression. Like that is, he's just trying to, you know, he's trying to comfort himself. He has his arms like wrapped all the way around himself and stuff. It was intense. So yeah, it is striking. Do you want to talk about about Hatori and Shigure? Are you ready to talk about them?
Place to go.
All right, it's what we have left to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the dream is alluded to quite early.
There's a lot of stuff here that's alluded to that doesn't get delivered on until way later, which
way later.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to set this up. This is partway through the 3rd volume, so it's pretty early.
Yeah.
And yeah, the dream, although Shigure said that he was like, oh, you remember when I had that dream? But I thought all of them had the dream. I thought like him and Ayame and Kureno and Hatori had the same dream, but I can't remember.
I don't know.
I didn't check.
All had the dream, but he says they all woke up crying.
Yeah, they did.
I never remember that he said that.
Maybe he's the only one who like remembered the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And he said they all cried. Like he did say, well, he didn't say Kureno, but yeah, he said that him and Aya and Hatori all cried.
Yeah. So yeah, that's obviously the morning after Akito was conceived that they all woke up crying.
Yes.
And felt the bond already.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how Shigure is like obviously we know that Shigure and Akito have a relationship, but the way that he describes the feeling in his dream, like even as a child, he's like, I wanted it to last. I wanted to be able to hold it. It's like his motivation for wanting to be with Akito is to feel the bond the same way that he felt in the dream. It seems like is what he's saying.
Just like it talks about like how the bond becoming something painful for everything later on, which is a big like concept from later on about that was the old promise that started as a positive thing. It became this like horrible like chain around everyone's neck.
Yes, it transformed to something that was that's holding them instead of being something that's like attractive. And Shigure says that he still feels like it's attractive. It's interesting that Hatori is like, well, like I'm also just as cursed as you. So that's kind of interesting. Hatori, I mean, obviously he was in love with Kana, but then I think maybe he still feels that bond too, in some way. I mean, they all do, but the way that he describes it to Shigure the way that he comments about it to Shigure at the end.
Yeah, and I think Hatori is still one of the ones like closest to Akito.
It's true. He's
Did I
always
say
around.
Shigure or Hatori?
Well, I think you said Hatori.
Not quite on Shigure's level, but still seems to be one of the ones closest to Akito.
Yeah.
Even after all the time.
He has to take care of Akito.
And there's I was reading much later when I was flipping through trying to find that description of Shigure. And I was reading the part when it's like when Kureno first reveals the whole thing with Akito.
Yeah.
And he's talking about how he could never turn away from that, hurt crying girl or whatever.
Yeah.
At the same time as that, they also have Akito's freaking out about something in the main house, and
yeah,
Hatori has kind of a flashback to remembering young Akito asking Hatori to pick her up, and he holds on to Akito and picks her up in the current timeline. So shows that there's still kind of some of that old bond.
I remember that scene. It sticks out to me a lot, the one where Hatori goes and picks Akito up. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's it's also striking.
Yeah,
because we know about Hatori. I don't know. It seems like he's very torn between Akito and and I guess Kana or
Yeah, and even just with the Kana flashback, there's the repeated thing that he never blamed Akito. So
yeah, which seems I guess out of place.
It seems like he still has more some of that feels that bond and loyalty is still pretty strong.
Yeah, he doesn't seem as removed from Akito as somebody like Momiji or Haru.
Yeah.
Or we talked about Kisa and Hiro, they're they don't spend that much time with Akito, it seems.
Yeah.
But the older Zodiac, and I think they mentioned specifically Ritsu was too young, because Ritsu's kind of in between the age of Shigure and Tori and Ayame, and not as young as Yuki and Kyo and Tohru.
Yeah. So I think there's probably something to they felt that bond when it formed, where the other ones were born with it already there.
Yeah. Maybe they felt, I guess you're right. It's feeling, I guess, maybe you interpret it as I don't know how they interpret the bond. It'll be interesting when we get to some of those chapters, but maybe it's the feeling. Shigure describes it as passion. Maybe it's the feeling of falling in love or realizing that you have a connection with someone. I can see how that would be difficult to let go of.
Yeah.
And so, and that's that is the whole curse. So. But Shigure is intentionally trying to keep it for himself. It's it seems like he thinks that Akito, he has he interprets it as a direct relationship with Akito, right? Whereas others, I don't know how they feel about it.
Yeah.
And Shigure has sought a direct relationship with Akito.
Yeah, because part of Shigure's motivation is breaking the curse, so it's just him and Akito. Rather than Akito and all of the Zodiac.
Akito and everybody else, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's essentially his motivation. I think it's interesting how Hatori is oh, you and Akito's plan is going well, but I don't know if Akito is in on the plan. I don't know how Akito... does Akito feel that strongly about Shigure? It's not necessarily clear. Obviously they end up together, but I think I was always under the impression... I think
she does, but I don't think she's, I don't think she's in on the, break the curse so just them can be together, but I think she does feel a particular possessiveness of Shigure, just like Shigure feels for her. That's
true, because then that's why that's why things happen, I guess. But, Akito, I think, Akito's also slept with multiple Zodiac, it's not just Shigure. Although not you have to have strong feelings to sleep with someone, but...
Yeah.
It seems like Akito has a connection... a deeper connection with multiple members of Zodiac, maybe especially deep with Shigure.
Yeah. I do think a lot of her, sleeping with the other members is partially motivated by...
being mad at Shigure.
Wanting Shigure to, be jealous and stuff.
It's manipulating Shigure, specifically. Yeah. She manipulates the other Zodiac members in different ways, with violence, but with Shigure, it's emotional. Yeah. That whole scene was interesting. It is vague. It's hard to talk about. I think, it's hard to talk about without... spoiling things, because it's obvious what it's talking about.
Yeah.
I thought it was nice. It was interesting to hear Shigure's. It's also a scene that I don't really remember. It kind of gets lumped into a bunch of things where it's I know that this is part of the storyline. So it's kind of interesting to see Shigure's first interpretation of the first mention of the dream, and the way that he interpreted it, and how he, then he goes and visits Akito again. I still think it's interesting how Shigure is positioned above Akito constantly. This is the second time we saw it. It's also something that I didn't really take deep notice of, but I wonder what that's about too. What power does he have over her? Why is he always shown in that way?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like, I think the positioning is almost foreshadowing for that, because you do find out later on that he is one of the only ones who
can
really manipulate Akito and has some influence on her.
That is true.
Can, like, confront her directly.
Maybe that is what it is.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's kind of like foreshadowing that relationship earlier on.
Yeah. That's all I have to say about those. Mm-hmm. That's all I have to say about these chapters, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Nothing
spoilery stuff.
Yeah. It was good. It was a good one. I like these. We're getting these, like, these two. Sometimes we get two that kind of like pair together. I don't know that these two pair together, but it's just like one leads into the other, where we see some of Kyo's kind of hang-ups and guilt and feelings, and then we see like these other things that are manipulating other people and their guilt and feelings.
Well, timeline-wise, they go together too. Yeah. Like, they agree to go on the date, and they're going on the date.
Then they're going on the date.
Yeah.
The date. It's really interesting to me. The date is paired with Shigure, with their conversation. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of enjoying these, like, a couple of these times where we see these two things that are paired together and like thinking about why they might be paired together. And yeah, I think you're right. I think we talked about it in the non-spoilers that it's just like Shigure is inside. They are all the gang is having their double date on the outside. They're going out more and kind of like in regular society. They're doing this like regular activity, like going on a little like double date, and it's Valentine's Day, so I guess it's kind of like they're getting to express, like Kyo doesn't have strong feelings for Kagura, but Kagura at least is getting to kind of like express these like romantic feelings or whatever with people other than Akito. Like, they're getting to form this kind of bond together. You talked about kind of like one of your theories is that the Zodiac members are all really close with each other, and that's part of helping the curse break, maybe, or it's kind of related to things changing. Yeah. So this is like a good example of that. Whereas Hatori and Shigure are in the main house, they're in really close proximity to Akito, and like we get their opinion that they feel like they're connected to Akito and they can't break out of that. Both of them said that in their own ways, right? Shigure wants it. Hatori feels like he can't. He's just as cursed as Shigure or whatever, if you want to interpret it that way. So it's an interesting contrast, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that note, next time we'll talk about, we'll see what happens in chapters 17 and 18. I'm not sure what happens yet, so it'll be fun. You can follow us on all the things and send us your asks and questions. I'm always happy to answer them. I think it's really interesting. And yeah, if anybody catches any like things that allude to other things in other chapters, I know someone sent us a direct message on Twitter for one for later, which I'm excited about. But it's like way later. It's like in the 80s, so we'll see later. Yeah. But yeah, if anybody has anything that they want to share with us, please do, because we are listening to everything. I'm watching all the socials and the things, so and it's exciting for us. Okay, that's it for now. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That time I wasn't as excited.